Oh, wow, that's a good one as well. 292.8, and our average for February is 164.5. But what's remarkable is the number of days we had rain. I recorded 20 days over 28 that I recorded rain. So another very wet summer.
Indeed. And now we're into autumn and it's starting off wet as well. Peter, thanks again so much for updating conditions in Boban, and stay safe.
Thanks, Cameron. And we talked earlier about the leeches in Boban.
Hang on. That's Peter Scouten at Boban. Let's go to our news now.
Currently 20 degrees in Coffs Harbour and Port Macquarie. Good morning, Madeline Cross with ABC Mid-North and Coffs Coast News. The Weather Bureau says the Mid-North Coast region should expect more heavy rain today as major flooding continues along the Clarence and Orara rivers. The Clarence River levels at Grafton are slowly falling, while the floodwaters at Almara and Maclean are currently peaking slightly above the levee. Meanwhile, minor flooding is occurring along the Hastings River at Wauchope, with similar conditions likely at Settlement Point today. The Manning River at Wingham is also experiencing minor flooding, as well as the Macleay River and Bellinger River. The Bureau of Meteorology's Hugh McDowell says the mid-north coast could experience severe thunderstorms over the rest of the week, but particularly today and tomorrow.
Potential for some heavy localised falls and also some damaging wind gusts, so there could be localised flash flooding as well. For the rest of the week, that risk kind of extends into Friday, and then we're still seeing showers and unsettled conditions through the weekend.
A second person has died during flooding in northern New South Wales. Police found the woman in her 80s at a property on Casino Street in South Lismore yesterday afternoon and says she's yet to be formally identified. A crime scene has been established. Floodwaters are close to cattle farmer Tim Shipham's home at Southgate, north of Grafton. He says the water levels at his property are starting to recede, but it's the worst flooding he's seen in the past 9 years.
The general consensus is that this flood is definitely worse here than and higher than what the 2013 flood was, even though they're reporting 7.66 metres in the actual town centre.
A witness has told the New South Wales Bushfires Coronial Inquiry how he drove through a fireball and witnessed fire tornadoes at the Long Gully Road fire impacted his property in October 2019. Jessica Clifford reports.
Michael Mann spotted smoke near his North Coast property at Drake on the afternoon of October 8, 2019. He drove up the road to investigate, only to find himself driving through a fireball and witnessing fire tornadoes just minutes later. Mr Mann told the court there were winds more than 100 kilometres per hour and the conditions were nothing like he had ever seen as he tried to outrun the fire. He told the court he had almost died. The inquiry heard the Long Gully Road fire began on August 30 in Sandy Hill before going on to claim 2 lives, burn 74,000 hectares and destroy 45 homes.
The state and federal governments are set to be asked to back a call for a royal commission into the housing crisis. Local government New South Wales has unanimously supported a motion at its annual conference pushing for a campaign to establish the inquiry. The President, Daria Turley, says the system and sector are broken.
There is something wrong. There's something needs to be fixed, and the only people that can fix it is the state and federal members. We need to be creative on how we get that balance. We love tourists, but we've really got to look after the citizens.
The Mid-Coast Council has started to repair and fix the monuments it damaged at the Bites Cemetery near Wingham in 2019. The council was forced to apologise for wrongly laying down headstones as part of its monument risk assessment program. It says of the 68 monuments requiring restoration, 23 have been completely restored. Council is still trying to find a registered party or family to deal with 14 of them. Liveable Communities Director Paul Dazelle says they'd like to have all the works completed by the middle of this year.
It has been a very, very long process, and it's been certainly dissatisfying to the families. It's also been dissatisfying to the council laws and the staff, and the council are trying to fix the problem that was created there.
In news elsewhere, Prime Minister Scott Morrison will continue with his duties while spending the next week in isolation at home after testing positive to COVID-19. Mr Morrison underwent a PCR test late yesterday after developing a fever and suffering flu-like symptoms. And Russia's defence ministry has warned residents in Kyiv to leave their homes as it plans to strike more targets in the Ukrainian capital. To the weather, very high chance of showers in the south today, as well as the chance of a severe thunderstorm with damaging winds this afternoon and evening. Major flooding is occurring on the Clarence, moderate on the Arara. Minor flooding is continuing along the Macleay River, Hastings, Manning and Bellinger. There's very heavy surf, which may lead to coastal erosion south of about Foster.
The changes to the ports, it was a government decision in a government Adam Marshall was part of. And he says it's a crucial issue and suddenly Adam is interested as part of his campaign for the seat of Parkes. I mean, Adam Marshall's still the member for Northern Tablelands and there's been rumours swirling about a potential move to federal politics. But I mean, that aside, is it frustrating that this wasn't worked out at the time or do you understand that Newcastle at the time was very much a coal port?
Well, certainly the legacy issues were that Newcastle, the armada of boats that were sitting off Newcastle meant it wasn't very competitive for anything else other than coal, a decade or so ago. Now that's changed, and I understand that there will be potential for change through legal and ACCC action. And if there's legislative changes required too, if we make a concerted effort, we should all work towards getting a more efficient port of Newcastle, and that'll really, serve the team, the economic recovery of New South Wales really well.
All right. Well, we thank you for your personal and also industry insights this morning on this issue, Xavier Martin. Let's keep in touch and see how this development goes. We appreciate your time on the program today.
Thanks, Patrick.
That's Xavier Martin there, a grain farmer at Malali and also the Vice President of the New South Wales Farmers Association. Coming up to the latest ABC local news at 7:30. After that, we will get a wrap of the flood situation around the Tenterfield Shire and also check in on the relief effort for Lismore.
ABC Radio, it's yours.
Yours for sharing your news.
Yours for airing your local perspective.
Yours in good times and bad.
ABC Radio.
Good morning, Lani Odaway with ABC New England Northwest local news. A water bomber pilot has told an inquest into the deaths of 2 bushfire victims how he considered landing his chopper to save them, but was unable to do so safely. Jessica Clifford reports.
The New South Wales Bushfires Coronial Inquiry has heard details about the final minutes of Gwen Hyde and her husband, Robert Lindsay, at their Cooningbar home during the Black Summer bushfires. The couple had stayed with their home as the fire approached and was spotted by a helicopter pilot waving for help on their veranda at 5:47pm on October 8, 2019. Ashley Hogan told the inquest into their death he dropped a bucket of water for them and considered rescuing them, but felt there was nowhere clear to land. The inquest heard the couple were tough, loving and community-minded people.
Elsewhere, a second person has died in the flooding disaster that's hit the state's north. Bronwyn Herbert has more.
The Lismore Mayor, Steve Creek, has confirmed there has been another death from floodwaters in the town.
Unfortunately, we've had 2 confirmed deaths.
It comes after police confirmed yesterday a woman in her 80s died in her home in Ewing Street that was inundated with water. Mayor Steve Creek says authorities will be door-knocking today.
Fire and rescue will be returning to go through every single residence, every single business, probably with the sole purpose to make more grim discoveries, unfortunately.
Ballina and surrounding communities are also facing record floodwaters, with thousands of people forced to evacuate.
The state's councils have agreed to push for a royal commission into Australia's housing crisis. The motion from the Ballina Shire has received unanimous support at Local Government New South Wales annual conference in Sydney. The President, Daria Turley, says councils also want action to limit the impact of short-stay accommodation on the rental market.
Can there be caps? What are the limits? What are the costs? Broken Hill City Council had a very interesting motion around having tax incentives for housing so locals can afford to buy a home.
The federal water minister is stressing there'll be no more water buybacks under a coalition government to help make hundreds of gigalitres in promised water savings. Under the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, 450 gigalitres of additional water savings for the environment need to be recovered by 2024, with just 2 gigalitres recovered so far. Under the law, if water savings targets in the basin aren't met by the deadline, the Commonwealth is then required to enter the market to buy back water entitlements from irrigators. But the Minister, Keith Pitt, says the government won't be doing that.
Well, I want to be very clear. I mean, it is the government's position that there'll be no more buybacks. It is also the National Party position there'll be no more buybacks. The only risk to that, of course, is a change in government.
Although police in Moree have been seizing illegal trail bikes for 3 months now, they say vehicle accidents are still happening weekly. More than 20 unregistered vehicles have been taken and charges laid on its owners since November last year as part of Operation Trailblaze. But New England District Commander Steve Luxer says the incidences haven't stopped in the community.
Quite disturbingly, I was confronted by the image of 3 persons riding motorbikes through the town. Neither had appropriate clothing on, and the young person stood up to lift his bike up, who had stuck in the mud, and his leg had totally fractured. And I think the community have not only had enough of it, but they're actually really concerned. So it is quite significant.
A Gunnedah project that's planted thousands of trees for koala habitats both in town and on farmland is hoping its nomination for a national award will inspire others to help the endangered animal. The Save Our Species project is up for a Tidy Towns award, set to be announced in Albury this weekend. Landcare Coordinator Penny Milson says she was surprised as Gunnedah is also one of 3 groups asked to give a 15-minute showcase of their work.
One of them is about a men's shed. And another one is about a kitchen garden program. So I guess this will raise the profile of, we'd like to inspire other landholders to consider what they can do for koalas.
Taking a look at the weather now, partly cloudy across the region with a medium chance of showers for the tablelands and a slight chance in the northwest. There's also a chance of a thunderstorm this afternoon and evening. Top temperatures in Inverell of 30 degrees, Glen Innes 26, Armidale 25 degrees, Tamworth 30, Narrabri 33 degrees and Moree 34. You've been listening to ABC News.
His new song he's touring at the end of the year, including Newcastle, might I add. You're on ABC Newcastle Breakfast. News is next.
Take in the sounds of Cessnock over a coffee in Lambton. Find out what's going on across your region with ABC Newcastle. Your local.
Good morning, I'm Madeline Lewis with ABC News. Emotions are running high after a fire tore through an old Wickham wool store yesterday afternoon. The complex housed 3 buildings, which more than 100 firefighters fought to save. The fire was contained to 2 of the buildings and didn't spread to the nearby fuel depot. Ty Lovett Smart lives across the road and was evacuated yesterday as thick black smoke blanketed the suburb. He says he was devastated to see the old wool store burn.
I'm pretty overwhelmed, honestly. I've lived in this suburb my whole life, and it's pretty terrifying to see an iconic building on fire, especially right next to where I'm living at the moment. It's horrifying.
Fire and Rescue New South Wales says the fire was contained by 10 p.m. last night after 8 hours of firefighting. A spokesperson says it's still smouldering with pockets of hotspots and an exclusion zone has been established. Meanwhile, the fire has come as a blow to the refugee support service Zara's House. Sister Di Santelban says the complex housed donated furniture, blankets and quilts, as well as other businesses.
It's got a antique furniture warehouse there. It's got little businesses in there. I mean, I know Zara's House is going to be affected, but it's going to be a huge loss for Newcastle.
Ballina Wodonga Hospital has been evacuated as the flood crisis continues across northern New South Wales. 55 patients were transported to Xavier Catholic College overnight, where a temporary emergency department has been set up. A flood evacuation order has also been issued for Ballina Island. Dorothy Tran from the SES says if people can still leave safely, they should head to an evacuation centre.
We are aware that there is quite a lot of water around, so we do ask people to make some safe decisions for themselves in terms of where their location is, but we do understand that there are certain streets where you can still access up to Lennox Head, if not down south to Wardell.
Meantime, a number of minor to moderate flood warnings have been issued for the Greater Sydney area. Damaging winds and intense rain is predicted as an east coast low deepens. Russian forces have launched more attacks on the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. The details from Harry Sekulich.
A television tower in the capital has been struck by Russian shelling attacks, and the Ukrainian government is warning some telecommunication signals have been shut down. So far, Ukrainian resistance has stifled the advances of Russian forces into Kyiv, where the invading military is bearing down on a number of major cities right across the country. It has destroyed some residential buildings and hospitals, which has drawn heavy criticism from Western powers. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has warned that Russian crimes in Ukraine are mounting by the hour.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison will continue with his duties while spending the next week isolating at home after testing positive to COVID-19. Mr Morrison underwent a PCR test late yesterday after developing a fever and suffering flu-like symptoms. He says he will continue to discharge all of his responsibilities as Prime Minister, including a focus on the emergency response to the devastating floods in Queensland and New South Wales, as well as the situation in Ukraine. Organisers of this year's Newcastle show say the event is the biggest in years and they're hopeful there'll be strong support from the community. Yesterday, the Showman's Guild began installing more than 100 rides amid heavy rain at the Broadmeadow Showground, but the wet weather is expected to clear up by Friday. Show General Manager Emma Spencer says there'll be several events that haven't been seen before.
We've got a massive car show, lots of vehicles from all eras polished to perfection. We've also got camel racing this year, which is a bit of a new one for the show. That's on the Saturday. We've also got sheep shearing this year. That's a new one as well.
And the International Skating Union has banned athletes from Russia and Belarus from its international events due to the invasion of Ukraine. The decision follows an International Olympic Committee recommendation and doesn't even offer figure skaters and speed skaters from the two countries the option of competing under a neutral flag. The World Figure Skating Championships are scheduled for later this month in France. Checking the Hunters' weather now. Cloudy today, very high chance of showers and the chance of a thunderstorm, possibly severe with gusty winds along the coast. Heavy falls are possible in the lower Hunter today. Maitland is heading for a top of 23 degrees, Singleton 24, Newcastle expecting a top of 25, Scone 26.
Transition, it will be all right. In the view of some of the other experts we spoke to, that is not the case, and the government needs to give assistance to the Hunter and other coal regions to make sure that the transition doesn't negatively affect the regions. Matt Bevan, thank you. If you're not listening to anything else after you listen to ABC Newcastle, you should listen to Australia. If you're listening, second episode is all about the Hunter. Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Jenny.
Matt Bevan, the host of that podcast. After the news, we'll look ahead to a big weekend.
abc.net.au/Newcastle for what's on and when. The latest news, sports and program segments, the latest shows available online. abc.net.au/Newcastle. Your one-stop shop. Your local.
Good morning, I'm Madeline Lewis with ABC Hunter News. Fire and Rescue New South Wales says the structural integrity of two warehouse buildings in Wickham will be the biggest concern today. A large fire was yesterday contained to two buildings at the Woolstore complex, and hundreds of residents were evacuated from about 250 homes. Fire crews remain on site as they develop a plan to put out the smouldering pockets of fire and get residents back home. Superintendent Adam Dewberry says they're working at a safe distance today.
The fire is pretty well contained and the majority has been extinguished. However, it is difficult to get to the seat of some of those pockets of fire due to the internal structural collapse with the walls coming down. It's just a shell. Big concern for us today is the structural integrity. The walls have lost all their stability and their pinning that holds it all up.
Emotions are running high for residents in the area. Ty Lovett-Smart lives across the road and was evacuated late yesterday as thick black smoke blanketed the suburb. He says he was devastated to see the old wool store burn.
I'm pretty overwhelmed, honestly. I've lived in this suburb my whole life and it's pretty terrifying to see an iconic building on fire, especially right next to where I'm living at the moment. It's horrifying.
Meanwhile, the fire has come as a blow to the refugee support service Zara's House. Sister Di Santelban says the complex housed donated furniture, blankets and quilts, as well as other businesses.
It's got a antique furniture warehouse there. It's got little businesses in there. I mean, I know Zara's House is going to be affected, but it's going to be a huge loss for Newcastle.
Newcastle MP Tim Crackenthorpe says the state government has backed down on plans to dump toxic sludge from Sydney in the Newcastle region. Late last year, it was revealed the government was planning to transport to Newcastle 12,000 cubic metres of material containing lead, mercury, zinc and PFAS chemicals dug up during the construction of Sydney's Northern Beaches link. Mr Crackenthorpe says yesterday in budget estimates, infrastructure officials confirmed the sludge will now be disposed of in Sydney.
This proposal should never have been on the table. The pushback to this ludicrous plan was fierce, and rightly so. I mean, Newcastle is not Sydney's dumping ground, and, we shouldn't take their waste while they get all the infrastructure.
The latest data on regional housing values shows Newcastle and the Hunter Valley continue to record strong price rises as Sydney prices start to slow. The latest CoreLogic National Home Value Index saw Sydney's prices drop slightly last month for the first time since September 2020. But values in Newcastle and the Hunter Valley rose by around 2% during February and were up by 30% over the last 12 months. CoreLogic Research Director Tim Lawless says the strong results indicate the region's property boom isn't over yet.
This trend towards regional population growth is one factor driving prices higher. Against the backdrop of very low listing numbers, we are seeing evidence that the growth trend is losing some momentum, but I think the regional markets, especially those markets that are commutable back into Sydney, will remain quite popular.
There's been a jump in new COVID-19 cases in the Hunter, New England, but hospitalisations remain stable. The Health District recorded 1,116 new cases yesterday, compared to 728 the day before. More than 900 of the new infections were detected via rapid antigen tests. Local hospitals are currently treating 29 people with COVID, while 3 are in intensive care. Organisers of this year's Newcastle show say the event is the biggest in years and they're hopeful there'll be strong support from the community. Yesterday, the Showman's Guild began installing more than 100 rides amid heavy rain at the Broadmeadow Showground, but the wet weather is expected to clear by Friday. Show General Manager Emma Spencer says there'll be several events that haven't been seen before.
We've got a massive car show, lots of vehicles from all eras polished to perfection. We've also got camel racing this year, which is a bit of a new one for the show. That's on the Saturday. We've also got sheep shearing this year. That's a new one as well.
And in Women's A-League soccer, the Newcastle Jets have gone down to Melbourne City 2-0 in a match that marked a big milestone for captain Cass Davis. Davis officially broke the record for the most consecutive A-League matches for both men and women. Checking the Hunters' weather, cloudy today, very high chance of showers and the chance of a thunderstorm. Heavy falls possible in the lower Hunter. ABC News.